Welcome to another Tale Upon a Time. We're all different. We all have different gifts. We all have things which we're anxious about and things we are happy with. We all look different and have different ways we talk to each other. Some of us use words to talk, or sign language, or electronic talkers. And there are times we go through which make us fearful and worried, but other times we feel over the moon. And this story is about feeling proud of who we are and saying, this is me. It was a Monday morning like any other as the children made their way to Greenbank School. Some walked, some travelled by bus, others went in cars. And it was 8 o'clock in the morning, and the September sun had moved its way up in the sky with an orange glow. There was the usual hubble of chatter as the crocodile line of children moved its way slowly into the school building, followed by the thorough washing of hands. Mr Linnington, their class teacher, and Mrs Grover, classroom support, greeted them as they lined up outside the door. Groups of tables were all prepared with paper, pencils and felt pens, and 1 or 2 books had been placed in the middle of the desks too. And around the walls were paintings and posters of planets, the sun, moons and stars, because for the last 2 weeks they've been working on the topic of Journey into Space. There was the clatter of chairs as they sat down and made themselves comfortable. 1 or 2 of them had noticed an empty table which hadn't been there before. It had paper and pens on it, 4 chairs, but no one sitting there yet. Mr Linnington said, "Good morning, everybody. It's a lovely day, so you'll be able to go outside at break time. Oh, we're expecting 2 new children to join our class this morning, so let's all just make sure we give them a warm welcome. It's always strange beginning something new and going somewhere different." With that, there were nods and "Yes, Mr Linnington," as they got their things ready for the first lesson. There was a knock on the classroom door, and Miss Potts, the head teacher, came through with 2 children. "Good morning, everybody. I have with me 2 new members for your class. This is Celeste and her brother Ganymede. Please make sure you make them feel welcome." With that, she turned round and left. Mr Linnington said, "Come and sit down. We know it must be strange for you starting somewhere new." The children all looked at the 2 new class members whom they hadn't met before and tried to work out something about them. They noticed how they were both dressed, and it was very different to any clothing they'd ever seen before. Nothing like that in television adverts or catalogues. Ganymede and Celeste's tops and trousers were a kind of metallic silver material, and their shoes were silvery too. They weren't wearing a school uniform with the green tree logo. Ganymede and Celeste looked around the room, expressionless, then rested their elbows on the table. Mr Linnington said, "We hope you'll be happy in our class, and I know that everyone will do their best to make you feel at home. Janet, could you look after Celeste, please? And Daniel, look after Ganymede. Make sure they know where everything is and help them out today. Many thanks." Janet and Daniel moved their things across onto the table to join them and started chatting, trying to help them feel comfortable. Ganymede and Celeste just looked straight ahead of themselves blankly, saying nothing. Then, as Janet and Daniel looked closer, they noticed something different, even extraordinary. The 2 new class members didn't have eyebrows, and their eyes were just very slightly larger than usual, and around their irises were clear blue circles. What school were you at before coming here? Have you had to move a long way away? What do you like doing? But there was no reaction at all. Just nothing. Some of the other children looked at each other as if to say, "They're really funny," then carried on with their work. Ganymede and Celeste were talking to each other, but in their own language. They didn't need to use words in the way we humans do, because they talked to each other with their thoughts. "This is really, really difficult," said Celeste. "I didn't think coming to Earth would be so hard. I don't know what it means when they look at us like that." Ganymede replied, "I know what you mean, but they must wonder about us in the way we're wondering about them." With that, tears began to well up in Celeste's eyes. Janet moved across to her and put an arm around Celeste, but Celeste didn't know what that meant either. "I'm sorry you feel unhappy, Celeste. I'll do whatever I can for you." With that, something amazing happened. Celeste and Janet looked straight into each other's eyes, and in that special moment, they spoke to each other. Not with words, you understand, but by really seeing. Something happened in that moment, and Celeste knew the arm around her shoulder was saying, "You'll be all right. I'm here for you." And in turn, Ganymede knew that things would be okay too. Mr Linnington gave the children instructions on what he'd like them to do in their first lesson. "Right, children, what I'd like you to do is to say something in whatever way you like about what it feels like beginning something new. You could draw and colour in a picture, write a poem or a description, whichever way you'd like to do it. It may be something that's happened to you a long time ago, or very recently, even today. It's up to you. You've got plenty of time, and if you want to use more than one piece of paper, you can. Now, are there any questions before we start? No? Then just come and ask Mrs. Grover or me if you need any help." Mrs. Grover went around the class helping anyone who asked, and there was a quiet buzz as the children began their work. Mr. Linnington went over to the two new class members and spoke with Janet and Daniel. "I don't know anything about Celeste and Ganymede, where they've come from, what they are happy in doing. Can I just leave you to help them in any way you can?" Janet and Daniel nodded, but weren't very sure where to begin. They thought they'd just chat away as usual, but at the same time draw pictures with the felt pens, because that's sometimes a good way to start. Beginning something new, they both thought. Had their two new friends ever seen felt pens before? They may not have done, and so Janet and Daniel took the lids off the pens and showed Celeste and Ganymede how they worked by drawing pictures on the pieces of paper. Janet looked directly into Celeste's eyes and said, "If you move the pens on the page like this, you can make patterns or pictures." With that, Celeste's face changed, and she looked more relaxed, happier. She searched through the pens and took some red, yellow and blue pens out of the box. And when her hand went to grip the red pen, Janet noticed something else that was different. The ends of Celeste's fingers glowed with a beautiful shimmering light. Celeste began rapidly moving the pens on the paper, and the picture she created was amazing. It was like a photograph, and only took what seemed like a few seconds. Janet recognized it almost immediately. It was one of Jupiter's moons, Europa, 780 million kilometers from the Earth. She knew this from the poster on the wall. Celeste looked at Janet and used one finger to point at the far edge of her picture. The light at the end of her finger flickered, and suddenly the picture on the page was moving, coming to life like a movie film. It was amazing. Janet looked in Celeste's eyes and made the sign for home. Celeste suddenly laughed and nodded. At the same time, Ganymede had been busy drawing the most fabulous creatures, using his felt pens. Derek made the sign for amazing animals, and both Ganymede and Celeste pointed fingers up to the white ceiling. And with that, there was the most incredible light show of planets, stars, fantastic creatures, and, of course, Jupiter's moons, including Europa. All the children in the class looked up and said, "Wow, wow, it's incredible," and gave a great big thumbs up to Celeste and Ganymede. The children said, "You are fantastic. You are amazing. We wish we could do that." Then it was playtime, and they all went outside the school field. Celeste and Ganymede, in their silvery suits, made patterns as they skipped along with the other children. The children showed them how to make moves like in gymnastics, and then how to do handstands and cartwheels. Next, different dance moves, and finally how to play football. Celeste looked in Janet's eyes and said, "We're learning so much from you." Janet and everyone else gave the thumbs up to their two new class members and looked into Celeste and Janet's eyes and said, "We've learnt so much from you too." Playtime was over, and they went back into the classroom, and it wasn't long before Miss Potts was at the door again and told Ganymede and Celeste their transport was ready to take them home. All the children, including Ganymede and Celeste, touched each other's elbows and looked into Celeste and Ganymede's eyes, smiled and waved goodbye. Before they left, they gave them the pictures and writing they'd done before starting something new. One or two of the children were in tears that their new fantastic friends had to leave so soon. Celeste and Ganymede held the pictures that they'd been given to take back with them to Europa. They both smiled the biggest of smiles. All the children stood at the large classroom window looking out and heard a loud thundering noise. It was a spaceship lifting off from the ground. At the windows of the spaceship were Ganymede and Celeste, waving their hands, their fingers flickering with light. And as it rose in the air, there was a trail of silver, red, and yellow smoke, and two large blue circles. In beautiful letters, written in the sky, were the words, "Thank you, everybody. We'll visit planet Earth again soon." Once they disappeared into the distance, Mr Linnington was unusually quiet for him, and then he said, "This has been a day like no other before." He paused. Would anyone like to say anything? The children sat thinking and then said, "It must have felt very strange for Celeste and Ganymede, coming to a place they've never been to before, not knowing about us or what we thought about them. I'm really sad they've gone back. I was just getting to know them." Someone else said, "They've shown me it's okay to feel anxious to begin with if you're going through something new." Another person said, "It's taught me that none of us are the same, but in different ways we all have gifts." Another said, "Meeting them has shown me we need to take enough time to find out about each other. Mr Linnington, we must listen in whatever way is right for the other person." Someone else said, "It's told me that we're all different, and whoever we are, be proud. Don't be afraid to tell someone you feel safe with how you feel." Someone else said, "I've been thinking I can now see that we can learn something about ourselves too from each other." Mr Linnington said, "Great ideas, everyone. You're absolutely right. Remember, when we feel worried, anxious, or don't understand something, there are always family members or friends or teachers to help us feel okay again. We're not alone, even if at times we feel as if we're from a different planet. and two of their amazing new friends were. They couldn't wait to see them both again. Maybe they will. And that night, it was a clear, starlit sky, and some of the children went out into their back garden and looked up. "We'll never forget you both," they whispered. Suddenly, over in the sky where Jupiter was that night, appeared a blue, red, and yellow shimmering heart, and it was saying, "And we'll both never forget you." And remember, this is you, and be proud of who you are, and for us to be proud of who we are.